Yo, what is going on, guys? It is your boy Pup, and we are here to look at some of these Gen 3 beta sprites. I had a video go up with a bunch of these leaked sprites the other day. Some of them were not actually there, and we have a couple more that we've seen. So we're going to go over the first 50 of the Generation 3 sprites. If you guys do enjoy this and, like it, subscribe, then we'll go over the next few, then we'll go over the Gen 4 and the Gen 5, and eventually whatever else we see that comes out. But before we get started, for one, I do not condone the hacking of Game Freak that happened, but we have all this data and it's here, so I'm going to take a look at it, but I'm not going to reveal anything about new games, new anything like that, new anime leaks that may be available on the internet if you guys want to search for that sort of stuff, but I'm not going to be going over any of that. I'm not data mining any of this. I'm just taking it from other people and compiling all their stuff and just talking about it, explaining it to you guys. This sprite sheet is from a Twitter user of the name ydarb. So if you guys want to see everything that they have compiled on their Twitter, go check that out. But none of it is from me, and I'm not trying to take any credit from anyone that has been posting all these leaks. But let's get started. This first Pokemon on here, Japanese name Yu, translated to Rhylidia or something like that. This is going to be the red spider lily Pokemon. It's a bug psychic, and it's thought to be an early Ralts line based on the flowers. We see them in Oras. I'll put them up on screen, but they're all throughout the Hoenn region. And this has a dex number of 385 if you want to look it up in the document that I'll have. Next up, we have a beta version of Flygon in here, which is in the dex a bug and flying type Pokemon. So potentially looking at a Yanma evolution, but it does look like a Vibrava Pokemon. There are also a pre-evolution to Vibrava that isn't your normal Trapinch, although Trapinch is in here as well. So really interesting in this line, and I'm not exactly sure what happened in their developing process, but I'm excited with how it came out. But it does seem like it was kind of meant for 2 or maybe even 3 different lines in here. Next up is going to be this polar bear Pokemon called Snorora. It's dex number 379. We don't have any real information about it, but it kind of gives me Beartic vibes. We also see beta sprites for Beartic in the Generation 5 category that we'll see eventually on another day. But it kind of looks eerily similar to this, and it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities to see Gen 5 Pokemon, even as late as like Gen 8 Pokemon, make it in here with the beta sprites, as we do see a Scraggy in here and potentially Snom and Frostmoth even all the way back here in Gen 3. So I think this might just be an early version of the Beartic, or they potentially took this idea and turned it into Beartic later on. Here we have a flying dragon Pokemon, Ulan or Lightly is its English translation, dex number 362, and this is a potential Altaria, maybe an early beta Altaria based on its typing and the idea of it being a white dragon Pokemon, kind of according to a dex entry that it has. Again, I will link the spreadsheet in the description so you guys can go and look at all the stuff that we have compiled so far for all these Pokemon, which does include some dex entries. Not all of the Pokemon have their dex entries from the leaks, but a decent amount of them do, and I'm pretty sure this one does have a dex. Next up, we have this Pelipper. I mean, it looks very, very similar to what we see today. Obviously not as large, but very similar, same scheme, same design, same typing, same everything, but we won't see exactly the same when we look at Wingull later. Here we have an early beta Nuzleaf, which is pretty interesting. Kind of reminds me of those guys in Super Mario Odyssey. And it kind of also looks like Geno from Super Mario RPG. I don't know, I'll have pictures up just to kind of show it, and kind of, I guess, gives the Pinocchio vibes, which is really what this Pokemon is based off of in the first place. But besides that, this Pokemon pretty much stayed the same throughout its development. And this next Pokemon is kind of a mystery. Its name is Suiba, got the dex of 361, but there's no real description, no typing, nothing like that for this Pokemon. And it doesn't look like anything I've seen before. It doesn't even look similar to a Pokemon that we have so far. So I have no clue what to say about this. Kind of looks a little bit legendary, maybe like some sort of steel, like legendary dog sort of thing, but it's really hard to tell just from this old beta image. This Pokemon is called Torchin. We don't really have any idea about this Pokemon, but it does have the dex of 354. And what I kind of thought is it kind of sounds and looks like an early Bagon sort of thing. Has the same like bluish color, salamander-like scheme. And I always thought it was a little bit weird that, you know, it learns Ember, but I mean, it makes sense, fire-breathing dragon. But seeing like the lit up tail here, it kind of just connected the dots for me, but purely speculation. A lot of these Pokemon we just don't know a lot about. Next up is Panpanmu. This is Dex 366. No information about this Pokemon. Kind of looks like, I don't know, a little clay golem. I don't even know how to really articulate it, but I have no clue what this really could be, or if it was potentially used in the design of another Pokemon. So if I'm missing something, you guys let me know and kind of speculate in the comments about what you think this Pokemon could have been used for. Next up is Shabu, Dex 365, and we don't know anything about this Pokemon, but it kind of seems to me like it could be a Shuppet evolution before Banette, or some sort of counterpart, because it's right next to Shuppet in the Pokedex. The Shuppet, like Shabu, you know, obviously ghost sort of Pokemon. It looks very evil sort of thing. So something kind of counterpart ghost type Pokemon to go with that, but really no ideas about this one either. Next up are Dex numbers 357 and 358, Ponkmu and Tanpu. Obviously look kind of like pipe, steampunk, maybe engine inspired Pokemon, although they don't look anything like a Varoom or Revaroom really. So pretty interesting, and I wish that we had more mechanical like Pokemon like this. I really like the Varoom and I love these designs, so I'd love to see them in a future game. And if they were put in a fan game, I would definitely play that too, because these Pokemon look super cool. And it would be fun to have another, you know, a couple of steel types. Maybe Water Steel would be a great type for these Pokemon if they are indeed that sort of pipe, fire hydrant sort of thing that it kind of seems like they could be. Now, forgive me with the pronunciation of this one, but it's Shiomangoon, I think. Dex 353, and obviously an electric or like magnetic sort of crab Pokemon. As you see, it's got the magnets. Seems like it would be like a Cloth or Crabominable sort of inspiration, but you know, obviously we'd have Crabominable being an ice type and Cloth just being pure rock. So kind of interesting. So we might see, you know, portions of the design in those, but nothing really exactly like this, although definitely could have been used as some inspiration. And then this is one of the Pokemon that people are most hyped about. This is Uruhawk or Basiamo, something like that. Actually was a potential Delibird evolution, according to what it looks like in the Pokedex files in there, but later obviously changed that Blaziken and kind of has that Latias form as well. It was supposed to be a pure flying type, so it doesn't make that much sense to be the evolution of like a Delibird, but also I kind of get it based on the color schemes and how they look, but also kind of takes some looks from like Braviary. They may have had ideas from this or the mixture, but really interesting Pokemon that we see like pretty late in development, has full sprites, front and back and everything. So I'm really excited to see this one, and maybe people can put this in their ROM hacks as well. Starting on the second row here, we have Burumusu, Dex 341, which really reminds me of like potentially an early Snover or a Abomasnow sort of Pokemon, or maybe even a single stage or a pre-evolution or a post-evolution to those sort of Pokemon. But also kind of gives me Regice vibes, potentially an early version of that, as it does look like that sort of Cyclops form that we do see with all the Regis. And I mean, it definitely could be. We don't see anything else related to any of the Regis in here, so potentially some of these Pokemon could be the early designs for those. Next up is Ryu. Kind of sounds like Raikou, but it is like an electric dog, Dex 340, which is right after Manectric and Electrike. It really seems like it would be the Manectric evolution, with those similar sort of names if you look at the Japanese names for Manectric and Electrike, sorry. But we don't really have much info on this Pokemon, but I'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to the beta sprites for that Electrike, how it kind of relates a little bit more to this Pokemon and really seems like this is the post-evolution. Next up is this kind of leafy looking Pokemon, Parun or Plapas, Dex 334. It's called the Sightseeing Pokemon in the Pokedex and supposed to be a flying type. Pretty interesting. And at first it kind of looks like it could be something related to like Tropius, but we do see a very solid Tropius Pokemon later. So potentially like sort of a pre-evolution to that, but obviously purely speculational because we don't really know too much about this. Now this right here is the Hariyama. It has a little bit of a different name if you look in the document, kind of what it's under. So it's just a beta version basically of Hariyama, but it kind of gives me more like electric fighter sort of vibes than what we see. But the Makuhita that we'll look at in a little bit looks very different. So this may have potentially been supposed to be a 3-stage Pokemon, or Hariyama was supposed to be separate from Makuhita and what we think is a pre-evolution. And right here is the Tropius Pokemon. This is just a beta design, basically the exact same thing, except for in the beta, this is the banana Pokemon. In the actual game, it's the fruit Pokemon. I don't understand why they would change that. But yeah, basically the same thing, and we see like the same exact design, just obviously an early version of it. Here's an interesting looking like Yeti fighting sort of Pokemon, I think, named Boyado, Dex 280. But yeah, like I said, we don't have any information about it, but it does give me those Yeti vibes. Potentially also something that's kind of looking at the Abomasnow sort of thing that we see in the next generation of Pokemon, maybe combined with the tree Pokemon that we saw earlier that seems like an obvious ice type as well. Now when we look at this Pokemon, it looks like it would be like an early Volbeat, Illumise sort of Pokemon, but it's actually an early Wingull. It has the Dex 281. It's the water bird Pokemon. Doesn't really look like it at all, but it is a water, or it's a flying water type, which we don't have many pure flying type Pokemon or primary flying type Pokemon. So eventually that was reversed and we had the complete design change. But really interesting how this Pokemon evolved in the Pelipper, or maybe Wingull was potentially supposed to be a pre-evolution to like a Volbeat or Illumise. Potentially having like a split path evolution sort of thing, and those Pokemon could have been bug flying at some point, or water types as well. It's really all speculational, but really is not what I expect when I would think of a beta Wingull. But right here are some Pokemon that we have definitely seen in the latest generations. This is obviously Snom and Frostmoth right here, but the names are Hippo and Snown. So I mean, pretty similar with the Snown versus Snom sort of thing, but obviously like complete like same design. We have like the butterfly snow Pokemon, and it's pre-evolution, kind of just chilling on the floor doing whatever it wants to do as a little bug guy. Pretty cute. But interestingly enough, these guys aren't even right next to each other in the Dex. They're separated by a couple numbers, but pretty obviously inspired the Snom line. And it gives us hope that potentially other beta Pokemon in here, or in the other leaks that we'll see, could potentially make its way into the mainline games. Here is a very unfinished looking Pokemon. It goes by Epilado or Piper, which is the lottery Pokemon, number 350. Just a basic normal type, but its Dex entry talks about it changing into different forms during evolution. Which sounds pretty interesting. Maybe like an Eevee clone, like we see a bunch of Pikachu clones. Maybe this could be something very Eevee inspired, since that's obviously a super popular Pokemon in the games. This is a Pokemon that looks a little bit similar. That egg color, that eggshell really looks like Piper, and it does come right before in the Dex at 359, but this is Charmin. But if it's not pre-evolution to Piper that we see, then it also could be like a potential Happiny, Cleffa kind of sort of Pokemon, obviously baby Pokemon, sort of inspired thing that seems really interesting, and we don't really know what it was used for, but potentially could have inspired a ton of different baby Pokemon later on. Here we have Lotad, obviously different color scheme sort of thing. Obviously Lilypad is the same, but the body looks a lot different, and it looks like it should have 6 legs, maybe even more, where in the normal version of the game it goes down to 4. So a little bit interesting, but basically just the exact same Pokemon. Next here, I want to take a look at the Shedinja because its sprite is so cool. It looks absolutely insane. but basically literally the exact same. This Pokemon stayed the same for a while. I think it's a really great idea. I'm glad they implemented it in the games, but this sprite looks so insane. Going down to the third row, we see the squid Pokemon, Toro Ika, something like that, number 293. It's a squid Pokemon, obviously, but it comes right in the decks after Claydol, and it has kind of the similar shape, and the designs on it kind of like give me Claydol vibes. So this could have been sort of a Claydol-esque Pokemon. Maybe could have been. Maybe Claydol wasn't even supposed to be, aligned with Baltoy, as it's not right next to Baltoy in the Pokedex numbers. So kind of speculating there could be a little bit more lore than meets the eye, with kind of a connection between these sort of Pokemon. Next up, we have this like kind of gem Pokemon. It's called the Blackstone Pokemon, number 282. The name is Toda or Koroboshi. And I think this could have been potentially reworked into like the Banette design, or just totally scrapped altogether. Kind of gives me Banette vibes just like looking at its face and its kind of figure, but obviously like just a kind of a floating stone Pokemon. So I don't really know what happened with this thing. What do you guys think? Like, let me know, because I know just as much as you guys. Next up, just a normal little Lombre, and then after that is a normal Claydol. Which both basically seem the exact same, except for this Lombre doesn't have a hat, interestingly enough. Something a little bit more interesting that we see is this Seedot that definitely looks like the guys from Mario Odyssey. I'll try to put them on the screen. I remember it's from like the last couple of kingdoms that I remember, but I mean, definitely a complete like redesign from what we've seen, and this looks really cool. It kind of gives like samurai sort of vibes that we don't see with a Seedot of today. And after that, we see a Masquerain, but it doesn't look like Masquerain. This is something straight out of Creepypasta. Like, it's literally just a floating eyeball, has wings that kind of look like Umbreon with a black and yellow sort of designs. So really interesting change to what we see, because they do have basically the same Surskit, I'm pretty sure, looking at the files. So to have a Masquerain that's so weird and off in the other direction, I mean, looking at its dex information, it sounds just like normal Masquerain, normal typing, normal everything. So I wonder why it looks like this. Next up here is going to be Sableye. This Pokemon, it looks like Mega Sableye. I mean, we see it with the gem shield kind of out in front of it, but this is obviously, where they got that design for Mega Sableye, and I think it's super cool that was all the way back here in the Generation 3 beta, and we got that Mega evolution. So who knows what we're going to see, potentially. I mean, obviously we do have a Manectric Mega, but we could have seen something like that evolution really come out here, which is super crazy. Next up here, we do have a Sharpedo. Obviously, it looks a little bit different. I really like the tail on this. Kind of looks like, an arrowhead sort of thing. Makes it look super dangerous. But basically the same sort of idea, and the deck stuff all looks very similar to what we have for the Sharpedo today. But here we have the Electrike and the Manectric. These basically look the exact same, just like a beta sprite, but it's really interesting looking at the dex entries. If you look on the spreadsheet shown, the dex color for Electrike is blue, which kind of goes with the evolution that it kind of looks like, because that obviously is, more blue than both of these Pokemon, but the color was kind of reworked into the shiny color. But definitely seems like these three Pokemon are connected. If we look at their Japanese names, they all, basically spell out the same thing. I don't have them exactly here, but if you open up the spreadsheet, you'll see them, and they're all right next to each other in the decks. So sad that we were robbed of a Manectric evolution, because that would have been insane. Getting back into the new or scrapped Pokemon, this is going to be Kajito, number 337. Kind of, looks like a grass chipmunk that has Petron-like ears sort of thing. I don't know if those are wings, like if it's like a flying squirrel sort of thing. It's really hard to tell just from a little sprite here, and we have no information, no typings, no dex sort of stuff about this Pokemon. So it's really just all speculation, like with a lot of things going on here. We also have a beta version of Skitty. which looks very different from what we see today, with completely different color scheme. It also has that sort of, rounded, I don't even know what to call it, but on its hair in the front, just seems kind of interesting to, remove that. But it kind of, gives me sort of Delcatty vibes as well. So potentially this was supposed to be a one-stage Pokemon at first, and they ended up splitting it into Skitty and Delcatty. And I could definitely see that, and it seems, very possible. Now here is a Pokemon that's pretty interesting. Its name is Pyoko, or Poyoko, 332. We know nothing about it, but looking at it, it has that Torchic hair that, we don't see in our original beta Torchic starter. So maybe they took that and kind of the colors from it, because it also has that same exact color, whereas the beta Torchic is a lot darker, of an orange. But also it is kind of interesting as we look into the next Pokemon here as well, which is going to be Ninfu, which is probably an evolution. It's kind of a bee Pokemon, and it kind of reminds me like these could be Combi and Vespiquen sort of ideas, that really got hashed out later in the next generation, because Ninfu, I mean, it really gives like Beedrill matched up with a Venomoth sort of vibes, something, around those, maybe Butterfree instead, something like that. So maybe getting those fleshed out a little bit more. We're starting our last row that we're going to go over today. So if you guys are interested in, learning about all the other beta Pokemon, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll have that up to you guys tomorrow. But we're going to start here with Maki slash Ubosagi. I don't really know how you pronounce it, man. To be honest, I'm just, saying what's there. But Pokemon 294, it's the foster Pokemon, and honestly, it's kind of hard to see what it looks like. It looks like some sort of bunny, potentially with grass on its back. But I think it says that it's a normal type Pokemon in there. But what do you guys think that it kind of looks like? Do you think that this was potentially used for some Pokemon down the line? I honestly have no clue, and this is one of the Pokemon that I have a lot of questions about, because we should know a lot from the Dex information, but we really don't. Next up is going to be Gyrubi or Bisquial. This Pokemon is 297. It's a grass type. It's the everlasting summer Pokemon according to its Dex. So maybe potentially a possible Roselia evolution, or kind of replacement for Roserade sort of thing, since that hadn't come out yet. It's kind of what's being speculated if you look at the sheet that's in the description, but also could be related to a couple of the other Pokemon that we'll look at pretty soon. But first of all, we have to look at this little cutie. This is the Shroomish. Obviously, similar design, but obviously different colors. I don't see anything about a Breloom in here at all, which is pretty interesting. So who knows if Breloom was kind of a later idea. We obviously don't see a lot of the Pokemon in here, so it's all speculation. But basically just the mushroom Pokemon that we all know and love. But here we have a Baltoy. Doesn't look like Baltoy at all, but that's why I was kind of, thinking about other solutions with Claydol and the Squid Pokemon that kind of had the same ideas, and thinking that there's more lore there than we know, because this definitely does not look like a pre-evolution to Claydol, and it definitely doesn't look like it would be a ground psychic type like it says, and its deck stuff looks very similar. So who knows what this actually is, and I don't think we've seen something similar. Maybe like Marini Toxapex kind of gives the same sort of vibes way later down the line in Sun and Moon, but really interesting design for Baltoy right here. But here we have another grass Pokemon that we don't really know too much about. This Pokemon is Potty or Canbach, shrub Pokemon 298. So right around the everlasting summer Pokemon that we talked about earlier. But it kind of looks like the branches could have been used for like Shiftry for that kind of later design. But also kind of screams to me like it could be a Sudowoodo relative sort of thing. Bonsly had not been out at this point off the top of my head. But it's a grass water Pokemon, so kind of interesting. Could have been like a post-evolution to Sudowoodo sort of thing, or could have been what was supposed to be an evolution to the summer Pokemon that we saw earlier. Here is Katakata or Komari. That's spirit Pokemon with a dex of 299. pure ghost type, despite what it looks like. Kind of looks more like a Baltoy than the actual beta Baltoy does. But something interesting about this is that I think the Flygon's dex ends up being the spirit Pokemon eventually. So kind of interesting to see if there's any actual relation between this and the Flygon line, because as we know, the Flygon that we see in here and the Flygon that we know are completely different, and there's a lot of confusion about what's going on with Trapinch, Vibrava, and Flygon. Next up is this little cutie, Monarabi, 300 in the dex, but honestly, I have no clue what this guy could be resembling at all. I mean, kind of the face gives me Charmander vibes, but obviously doesn't seem anything like that. So if you guys have any ideas for this, let me know down in the comments, because I'm honestly stumped on this one. I have no sort of speculation about this at all. And then next up is Otoma, the scale Pokemon, dex 331, pure water type. I saw speculation that this could end up being related to like the Dynamo or Timple line. I think Timple is what I saw, but I don't really see that. It kind of looks like a water oddish almost sort of thing, but also could be related to the squid Pokemon we saw earlier. Really interesting that we don't know a lot about this, but the dex entry I think is on the document if you want to go take a look at that. After that, we see Makuhita and Hakeyu, which, I mean, basically looks like their own line. Looks completely different from Hariyama, which we saw earlier. But if we look at the dex for Makuhita, it has its color listed as yellow, as we would see with a normal Makuhita, but here, it doesn't look anything like yellow at all. But we don't have a dex entry at all for the pre-evolution, but I mean, there's a spitting resemblance right there. So potentially this was supposed to be, a Makuhita and its pre-evolution, and then Hariyama as its own separate Pokemon, and eventually maybe got scrapped and pushed together into one line. And then last but not least on this line, we have an early Clamperl and Huntail. Obviously their colors are a little bit different, and the Huntail, I mean, looks a little bit more, killer than what we see. But their shiny colors are purple. They were changed to blue, the actual Pokemon were, so maybe these were repurposed to the shiny colors, but basically, very similar designs to what we see. I do like what we have a little bit more than these beta designs right here though. But before I'm done today, we're gonna look at one more Pokemon, but I urge you guys to leave a like and subscribe if you do enjoy the leaked content, because I'll be uploading a lot more of it as long as my channel does not get nuked, which I hope does not happen. But yeah, let's look at the original Mudkip. So this guy's name is Warabido, something like that. Warabido, kind of sounds about right. But this is the original water starter over Mudkip, who may have been an idea for Generation 5 at this point if they worked that far in advance, as when we look at the Generation 5, you're going to see basically a shiny Mudkip that's standing up is in those beta files. So I mean, could be very, very similar, but eventually this got scrapped. But I think it kind of, gives vibes of the Wingull, kind of repurposed into that, making it align with Pelipper as we see the colors, and it just kind of makes sense looking at it. And looking at how we have a weird Wingull that doesn't really represent what we think of as a Wingull at all. But this rabbit Pokemon, super duper cool, and I really hope that eventually we get to see a Pokemon really similar to this. Obviously we do have a bunny starter in Scorbunny already, but a man can dream, and this would be a dream Pokemon to have in the future. But that is going to be about it for me. There's a lot more leaks coming out. So if you guys do enjoy, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Leave a comment. What Pokemon do you really love about all this? What Pokemon do you want me to comment some more on? What about those next 50 do you want to see and want to hear? And yeah, what do you guys think? I don't know. That's going to be about it. See you guys. Peace out.